You're listening to the Talking Headways podcast network.
Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on.
Happy Monday. This is Mondays at the Overhead Wire, sponsored by our super generous Patreon supporters. I'm Jeff Wood, your host, and joined by Han Solo. That's right. Every Wookiee's favorite right-hand man is here to save the day. We're Han Solo this week after a great series of guests here on Mondays. I really appreciate everybody coming on the show. We had some good conversations. We had some great discussions about autonomous vehicles and new California cities and all kinds of stuff. So if you missed those, go check them out if you get a chance. But this week, we're going to do a bit of housekeeping. I had some extra news that I wanted to share because of all the folks that we had on. You know, when people come on, we are limited in the amount of stuff we can talk about because of time. But there's so much stuff that happened in the last 4 or 5 weeks or so as well. So we'll get to talking about a couple of those things extra, and I'll try to go extra fast. But also, we're heading into fall, so that can get a bit choppy too on Monday's show. So I want to kind of get stuff in again before everybody's schedule gets too crazy. I'll be at Impact Conference in November in Phoenix, and I hope folks will come and say hi. Hope to see people there, and we're going to be recording some shows and having some fun and seeing some old friends and things like that. So looking forward to going to Phoenix and checking that out. And then, as we always do when we're doing a Han Solo show, we got some news about what's coming up on Talking Headways, the Thursday podcast. So we recently released an amazing episode with Bob Stearns, which I hope folks get a chance to listen to. Definitely pick up his book if you're hoping to build some greenways or pathways or anything in the future. The book is called Beyond Greenways, but I think it's great for everything and talking about greenways and all the things you can do around walking in cities. So check that out if you get a chance. The last episode we had. And then also on the Impact podcast, which we actually do an Impact podcast and then we release it on Talking Headways a month later. But if you want to get early versions of Talking Headways, you can go to the Impact podcast and check that out. Abby Thorne-Lyman, one of my really good friends and colleagues from years ago at Reconnecting America, was on the show. She was the director of real estate at BART. And now she's the base redevelopment director for the city of Alameda, which is really cool. She just moved into that job this week. But she talks about BART's TOD program. And if folks in the Bay Area are interested in learning more about what BART does related to TOD and how they get rid of property and how they see things, I'd definitely take a listen to Abby. She was at BART for almost 10 years and doing really good stuff and really awesome things related to, TOD there. And I'm glad she's going to be in Alameda doing really cool stuff on the base redevelopment. So we'll see what she comes up with. And I'm sure she'll be back on the show. She's always a great guest. And then we also talked last week with Carrie Watkins at UC Davis and David Ederer about their new safe systems pyramid research that they've been doing. A super great conversation with them, and that'll be coming out this week, actually, this Thursday. And I think will really blow some people's minds thinking about transportation safety, because there's so much stuff in that paper and thinking about Vision Zero and other things that I think I didn't really think about things the way that they actually frame them in the paper. And I hope it really changes a lot of people's minds about how we do safety in the United States related to transportation. So check that out if you get a chance this Thursday. We also had a great discussion last Thursday with Chris Fabian at ResourceX, and that'll be out in a couple weeks. I think it's funny, we were talking with him and I was actually referenced Carrie and David's episode, which isn't even out yet, and so he can listen to it. But you all be able to listen to it this Thursday, and when Chris's episode comes out, you'll be able to listen to kind of the connection I made between the two of them. But the idea that Chris is putting forth is priority-based budgeting for cities and public agencies, and they were behind a really cool climate-oriented budget process in Pittsburgh that I thought was super interesting, and I think it could be used for transportation departments and cities and everybody else around the country as well, just thinking about budgets in different ways, not as line items, but as, pursuing your goals and dreams that the cities have already laid out for themselves. So that's a really cool discussion. They've been doing it for 10 years, and it was really fun to talk with Chris about that. And I hope, again, the idea is to just kind of like find these really crazy ideas and things that people are doing out there in the world and bringing them to you all. And hopefully some of you all can take them and get them implemented in your place of interest, which is really cool and something that I hope comes out of this podcast from time to time. Also, we have some great recordings about books coming up. So Des Fitzgerald is coming up this Thursday. We'll be here talking about his book, The Living City, Why Cities Don't Need to Be Green to Be Great. And I've already started reading it, and it's really interesting. And it pushes back on a lot of like planning things that I think people held sacred, which is really interesting. I hope the conversation's fun, and I'm looking forward to chatting with Des. Also, Ben Goldfarb and his book Crossings, we have him set up for a discussion at some point in the coming future. So looking forward to that as well. He's had a lot of press on that book related to animal crossings and how cars and roads and the transportation infrastructure relates to nature, and how it actually results in a lot of dead animals, which is like 1 million a day or something like that, which is a crazy statistic that came out of the some of the reporting that's been done on that book. So it's amazing that he's going to come on the show too. And finally, I've been working on the Kingwood Greenbelt episode. I promise, I know I promised for many years that this episode would come out. I made another recording with one of the guests, one of the folks who actually helped design the trails and design Kingwood. So making progress there. So looking forward to doing that. Also, I had the archivists at Rice University go in and take a look at some of Tapley's archive there that's housed at the library at Rice. And so I'm really looking forward to kind of diving into that a little bit more. There's some really great news articles that I would have never found otherwise in that archive that talk about the greenbelts and what they were for and why they were built. And it's really cool. So I'm going to have to kind of piece that thing together. It's taking a little longer than I thought. I think it's going to be more like the Disney episode. If you all have listened to the Disney episode we did, or the water episode, where it's more like a This American Life-ish 99% Invisible type podcast, where we're kind of editing things together, and I'm doing narration and things like that rather than just interviews, because I think it deserves that, because it's such a really cool thing. And also I kind of gave David Zipper a hard time about his golf cart story, because he talked about how this town in Georgia has this purpose-built trail system for golf carts. And I think Kingwood might have been actually maybe not first, but they actually have a whole system of trails, 75 miles or so, that are used by pedestrians, cyclists, and everything else. And that's where I grew up. So it really influenced how I think about cities and how I think about suburban development too. And I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you all. So a lot of great books and ideas to share. Hopefully also record 4 or 5 episodes at Impact when we're in Phoenix. And so we're going to get guests for that too. I'll sit down with folks. Last year we had Earl Blumenauer and a couple of other really great folks come on the show. So hopefully I'll be able to line up some folks and have some good conversations there as well, and get a couple episodes in. So I really appreciate you guys listening. I hope this sounds exciting to you all. I just spent about 5 minutes talking about the future shows, but I really like doing this because I feel like it's a nice preview, and it kind of reminds me also what I've been up to. Sometimes I feel like churning out an episode a week is a little tough, but then when I hear about what they are and how they impact cities and the people that are really doing great work and that we're lifting up their ideas, I think that's really cool. So check those out when they come out. Also, check the episodes out that you might have missed already. So looking forward to sharing those with you all. Okay, so thanks to everybody who's been ordering scarves, bus and bike scarves. We've had a flurry of orders recently, which makes me think it's getting cold. Also, I've been posting a little bit more of them on Twitter and on Mastodon. And so I think every time I post something, I get an order in, which is nice. If you go to Twitter, at the top of the Twitter page on the Overhead Wire, there is a link to the website, theoverheadwire.com. And if you go to theoverheadwire.com, you don't have to go to Twitter, but I have it pinned to the top of my profile there, so you can see pictures. But if you go to the Overhead Wire, there's a button you can press and go and get a scarf. So check that out if you get a chance. The scarves are really cool. I've been selling these for a couple of years now, and I think people really like them. And if you don't have one, you definitely need one, I think. theoverheadwire.com. And if you want to order 5 or more, we'll give you a 10% discount. Email me at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Also, I know that Christmas is coming up, and I know that a lot of folks are really excited to get these as gifts for their friends. So it's not just for you, it could be for somebody else too. Also, we have our bookshop affiliate site where we are posting all the books that we have ever talked with the authors about. So we just put in Robert Cern's book from Talking Headways recently, Beyond Greenways, which is really great. Thanks to the folks at Island Press for sending that along and putting that together. Bookshop.org/shop/The Overhead Wire. All the books are there. Check it out if you get a chance. Also, we've designed a t-shirt with Richard Wozensky, and I don't know if you all have seen this yet, and I'll try to post this on Twitter more often, but it's a Cars Are Cholesterol logo. The logo looks like a heart, and it's the heart, and the heart is a city, and the cars are kind of clogging in on the arteries, and it just says Cars Are Cholesterol. And so you can get that at tpublic, bit.ly/Cars Are Cholesterol. You can also get them on mugs, on stickers, on anything else. If you are a Patreon member, or if you want to be a $10 Patreon member, you want to get the scarf with your order, or if you want to, if you want to just do a $2 membership a month, we send a handwritten note with some stickers, and one of the stickers is the Cars Are Cholesterol sticker. So check it out if you get a chance. We really appreciate that. And as I always say, get the purple one. I know some folks out there have the purple one, and it's really, really cool. So check that out if you get a chance. bit.ly/Cars Are Cholesterol. Also, all of these links and everything will be in the show notes in the podcatchers. So we have all the links there for everything down there. So if you forget a link and you were like, oh, what's that link again? Just open up your podcatcher, and all the show notes will be there with all the links to the stuff that would be in a shop if we had one. Okay, this is episode 141. We're live and in session. Before we get to the show, I want to let folks know that they can get this podcast or Talking Headways wherever you find your podcasts, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, and of course Apple Podcasts. Sorry to the Stitcher listeners who hopefully are listening now on other podcatchers, hopefully on other channels. So we're also on YouTube too. It just posts to YouTube automatically. So at some point, I'm hoping to do a few more videos and things, but I haven't gotten there yet. But the high-speed rail video is up there from recently when we had the high-speed rail podcast. That video is in the YouTube archives, so check that out if you get a chance. Okay, so the news. This is what you all are here for, and I've got a lot of it today, so I'm going to try to go fast, but not too fast, so I'm talking too fast, which happens when I get really excited about things. Here are the few stories that piqued our interest from the newsletter over the last few weeks. And as I said, I'm not going to chatter too much on the main items up top because I loaded the bonus items with things we missed when we had guests. And so I hope you all enjoy the news. And as always, make sure to go check out the newsletter to get these items and more in your inbox each day. Go to theoverheadwire.com to sign up for the newsletter. We've been doing it for 17 years. We go through about 1,500 items every day, and we pull out our favorites, and that's how we design this part of the podcast, as well as we do a piece for Greater Washington every Friday, and then also we have it at Urban Milwaukee and Streets.mn. So thanks to our partners for posting items that we post every week, and as well as the podcast. So we're looking forward to going into the news. Well, first up, California state law soon will usurp SF NIMBYs. San Francisco politicians and residents have long used housing rules to decide who can build what and where. In 2016, SB 35 passed and allowed any project with 50% affordable housing to move forward with little obstruction. Approvals went from 8 years to 48 days in some instances. Soon, the governor will sign SB 35's successor, SB 423, which will take away a lot of the opportunities to block dense urban projects in the city. And this was by Annie Freiman in the San Francisco Chronicle. Annie, for a long time, was Scott Wiener's legislative aide. I'm just excited about this. I'm excited about building more housing. I'm just tired of seeing projects on parking lots and everything else get blocked because of some arcane rule, or they say, well, you need to go back and look at the CEQA, relationships on this, or whatever it is. There's blockages all the time. And so let's just build some housing. All right, let's just build it. Let's build public housing. Let's build social housing. Let's build for-profit housing. Let's build nonprofit housing. I don't care. Build it all. Let's just build housing. We need it. There's so many people that need housing. And I know that it would be appreciated. Next up, Norway's purpose-built bike tunnel. Bergen, Norway just completed the world's longest bike tunnel at 1.8 miles. Nestled between the fjords with incredibly steep mountains, the passage is an escape tunnel for the parallel tram line. Instead of just building a small passage, they decided to make it into a walking and biking tunnel that saves cyclists 15 minutes each way. The city is currently recovering from an auto-dominated past. This was by David Zipper in Bloomberg CityLab. I will say, Bergen is one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been to. And I took a train from Oslo to Bergen and took a boat on some of the fjords before we got to Bergen. And I went with my parents, and it was just an amazing place. I saw the tramway, not the one that David's talking about, but I saw a tramway there when they first completed it. This was back in 2011, I think. And it's just a beautiful city. I'm so glad that they're doing cool stuff like this. It does rain a lot there. I think when we were there, we rented a car to go drive pretty far away. And they they told us this was like, it was unlucky because it was raining the 1 week, then it usually doesn't rain during the year. So there's a lot of weather stuff going on. But I think this is cool. Basically, they were building a light rail tunnel and they needed an escape hatch for people who might have gotten trapped on the train. And so they decided to make it a little bit bigger and allow bikes in. And now that people save 15 minutes of time each way. And that's a really great example of just, doubling up on your infrastructure for active transportation. It's really good. Okay, next up. Front Range rail depends on timing, politics. A rail line along the Front Range that connects southern and northern Colorado communities is gaining steam, but implementation will be dependent on politics and timing. The corridor along I-25 has been growing exponentially in the last several decades, and congestion and pollution relief is needed. But building such a line requires voter approval, and getting it on the ballot in 2024 with a defined spending and action plan could prove difficult. This was by Jared Bray in Governing. Yeah, build it. Let's build a line from Trinidad, Colorado at the southern edge to Fort Collins up in the north. And actually, maybe they can do it even bigger. Go to Santa Fe, Albuquerque, go down to El Paso, go up north to Cheyenne, Wyoming. That corridor is a really big corridor in terms of population. And so hopefully they can get something that connects all these places. And I think the Front Range would be really great because obviously you have Boulder, you have Fort Collins, you have Denver, you have, Colorado Springs down south. There's a lot of population on the Front Range and it's all, on the edge of the mountain. And so, basically there's a defined boundary that you can actually connect with all this transit. So really cool idea. I hope they can get something put on the ballot. I hope that this is something that comes to fruition. But as they say, the politics and timing are need to be spot on. The world's smallest skyscraper. The unofficial designation of the world's smallest skyscraper is given to a building in Wichita Falls, Texas, where J.D. McMahon, an oil businessman, decided to build some office space to fill the need back in the early 1900s. But what ended up happening is that he bilked investors out of a couple $100,000 at a time, millions now, by writing 480 inches instead of 480 feet in the contract, creating a 4-story building that stands to this day. This was by Barbara Speed in the City Monitor. Really funny story, basically. he built them out of, a couple $100,000 at the time because he wanted to build a quote unquote skyscraper, and it still exists. And so I guess it is the world's smallest skyscraper at 4 stories. There's plenty of buildings that are taller and shorter, but it's one that was supposed to be taller. And if you're thinking about the difference between 480 inches and 480 feet, basically when you write it in a contract, it has the quote instead of, one line as the quote, the two lines as a quote. So inches is 2 lines and feet is 1 line. So that's how we did it, which is pretty funny. The lawyers didn't really pay that close attention, I guess. Okay, Copenhagen's sponge city investments. To make sure extreme rain events don't cause damage to the city of Copenhagen in Denmark, the city is investing 1.8 billion euros by 2035 in green infrastructure, including catchment ponds, green spaces, adapted roads, and more. Most of the funding is coming from revenue collected by the water utility. After an extreme weather event that cost Copenhagen 800 million euros in 2011, the city has vowed to invest in strategies to absorb the slowly release water. This was by Jan Petter in Spiegel International, part of Der Spiegel, the magazine. There are lessons here for New York and any other city that's seen a lot of rain in a small amount of time recently. I know New York just had something go on last Friday. In San Francisco, we had earlier this year, we had 5 inches in a day, and it was pretty crazy. It actually flooded my basement a little bit. It's a lot of water, and it comes down fast. And I think that there needs to be ways to catch it, right? There's bioswales, roads can collect it, etc. But there's ways to do it and make green infrastructure that actually helps with a massive amount of rain. And at some point, there's not a lot you can do if something comes out of the sky that fast. It's just kind of crazy, and it's part of climate change. 5 inches, 10 inches a day, 50 inches in a couple of days in that one Hurricane Harvey in Houston. That's just crazy. I don't know what you do with all that water, but you can make investments that can collect a lot of it and put it somewhere until it needs to be drained so that it's not flooding homes and houses. So cool idea and cool thoughts from what Copenhagen has been doing. There's also other cities that have been working on sponge city ideas too, that are doing a lot to make this a reality for them, so they don't have to worry about the fall of the rain that comes too fast. Okay, and this is the last one for the main items, but it also kind of bleeds into the next bonus item section because I think these things are all connected, as I always say. Rethinking transportation outside of commutes. Researchers at Brookings took a deep dive into what the pandemic restructuring of transportation looks like based on real-time transportation data. They found that reduced commuting has impacted the degree to which regions can look to a central transportation narrative with regional characteristics. These findings carry opportunities and risks, but ultimately each place has a chance to write a new future or get stuck in inertia. This was by Adi Tomer and Carolyn George and Brookings. I think this is really important, and I know we're going to be in a new normal, but not one that can't serve transit riders. Commutes were important and overplanned for in transportation policy in the past. Rush hours are still overplanned for in terms of capacity of roads and the like. But what people really want is to get places in a reasonable amount of time. And I can say that for transit too. It doesn't matter if there's a train, it matters how frequently it comes and how fast it can take you to where you want to go. None of this 30-minute frequency crap, none of this hour frequency crap. And I know that there's small cities and towns that have buses that come every hour and they're a lifeline, and that's great. But I think that, in order to get more people taking transit, we need to have more service and we need to spend more money on transportation. And, I'm going to read the next two items because I think they're all connected to this item, and in the bonus section specifically. But I want you to put this Brookings item in the back of your mind when you're listening to the next couple of items as well. So this is the bonus items. These are the items that, basically the previous items were the ones that were most read. They got clicks, a lot of clicks, and people were interested in them. This section is the ones that I thought were interesting that maybe didn't get a lot of clicks. They got a few, but not a lot. And I thought that they were interesting, and I felt like I wanted to talk a little bit more about them and share them with folks on the podcast. So next up, I wonder how much digital ink will be spilled about getting people back to the office after the pandemic is long gone. It's interesting to see how such a profound change alters perceptions and realities. In today's news search, there were a number of interesting pieces related to this that had angles I hadn't seen before. In a report by MSCI on incentives to get people back to the office, researchers found that the best incentive was one that was out of the company's control: shorter commutes to work. I think this also holds a lesson for employers and cities more generally. People really appreciate living closer to where they work and not having a long commute, and are forced to make those housing cost commute distance trade-offs, but perhaps they don't have to. Investments in access could make a huge difference, but as we collectively continue to fund infrastructure, that hasn't really been a goal. It's been on congestion, driving speed, or rush hour, but not access. Perhaps these types of findings will finally push for a rethink. Additionally, there are a lot of folks that would actually rather not work at home, but ultimately there's value in hybrid work for them because of a family. And the value of that extra benefit isn't lost on workers. Now, only 1/5 of office workers are in the office full time. I don't think we'll see that changing if the commutes don't get shorter. And so this was something I wrote in my newsletter, as you can probably tell from me reading it. But I think that this is really important. I think that there's connections between all of these things. The commute that's post-pandemic is going to be different. And part of it's because of people who want to, have time that's a hybrid schedule. People aren't going to be like working from home all the time. They're going to have Mondays and Fridays off, and they're coming Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and the other times they'll be able to hang out with their family. And also the thing that makes it so that people don't want to come back to the office every day is, the commute, and actually being able to go home and pop in and get your kids from school or see something that's happening really quickly. And so I feel like there's something there about families, about people wanting more flexibility in their schedules and not just being a slave to the 9-to-5, paradigm that we've been in for so long. And also, that family part is really important. The family part is a big part of the commute. And I think people are realizing that, especially after the pandemic. So the next one is actually connected too. So I'm going to read the next piece about Stuttgart 21 too, which I actually also had in my newsletter. The last of 8 tunnels for Stuttgart 21 has been completed. Stuttgart 21 has been a controversial project since it began in the beginning. The initial idea came from a 1994 competition announcement that was held in 1997. The final design won unanimously among 126 submissions. The idea was to completely rethink Stuttgart's rail hub by increasing the capacity from 5 tracks to 8 and build 59 kilometers of tunnels to reduce travel times. Travel times will be more than halved for many areas of the city to the airport, reducing car traffic. Ulm to Stuttgart Airport was 1 hour and 35 minutes. Now it will be 30 minutes, for example. It's currently 120 by car. The project is also supposed to open up about 250 acres of central real estate for development where the old station used to be. Ultimately, the almost $10 billion project is supposed to be a marked improvement, but it is yet to be seen how impacts from urban development and transportation in the region will be seen. It's also another big urban mega project that will give lessons for future planners. So there's a lot of people out there that think we shouldn't do huge projects anymore and that we should be incrementally improving what we have. And that's all fine and good for places that aren't big cities, but I don't think it's actually helpful in the context of these big cities. And the reason why places like Tokyo or London or Paris work, in my opinion, is because they made massive investments in subways and transit infrastructure with big costs, price tags. Paris is now making even more investments in bike infrastructure. And there's an article out today that even talks about the traffic jams that they're experiencing. So that's actually a good problem to have from making these investments in commuter rail, regional rail, I should say. We can't call it commuter rail anymore because nobody's going to commute. They will, but it just won't be the same. Rush hour type stuff. And this is what I'm trying to get away from, right? This is what we're trying to get away from. But I think these really big projects, if done right, they can have massive life-changing improvements in people's accessibility. They can make huge improvements. And the travel time savings from the controversial Stuttgart project are huge. I mean, looking at a lot of these travel time savings, it's like an hour. It's like 30 minutes. It's like a huge amount of time. And, you can go read Alon Levy on Stuttgart if you want to know about other issues they're going to have, like capacity and things like that. But I just do want to point out that saving people an hour in travel time is no joke. And we just aren't thinking like that right now. And we might put a bus lane here, or we might put a transit line there, or a freight right of way there on a freight right of way because it saves money. But we don't actually look at the access how we should. And I think if we go back to the episode that we did with Greg Schill and Jonathan Levine about changing the rules of transportation in the U.S. towards access, these are the types of discussions that open up. And Baltimore is about to make a huge mistake, in my opinion, because they're doing something cheap, because they're looking at it from the perspective of, we can't do a subway, so let's do this light rail or bus rapid transit on surface, and because it costs less money. You can't start with cost. You have to start with access. You have to start with what people are going to be connecting to. And Austin, I would argue, should be a subway. And I'm going to get yelled at again for this, but it's about travel time, not having a nice, pleasant view of the capital as you pass by. It's not about surface light rail and people being able to look out the windows. I know that there's a ton of people that are like, I don't like a subway because I'm underground. I don't think anybody cares about their views if their 30-minute trip turns into a 5 to 10-minute trip. I really don't. And I don't care when I'm going downtown to San Francisco. When we go into the tunnel, I don't care that I can't see downtown San Francisco. I'll see it when I get on top of the surface. So I want to explore this idea more going forward, but post-pandemic thinking about transportation has got to talk about getting people places and redesigning systems away from rush hours and towards getting people to where they want to go. And I know that I talk about this a lot on the show. I know I talk a lot about access on the show, but I think that, rethinking transportation policy in this, quasi post-pandemic time period. And it's going to be a huge fight to get people to think about it this way. And it doesn't matter if you're in an autonomous vehicle, if it takes 2 hours to get to where you want to go. If you could get on a subway and get there the same thing in 20 minutes, does it matter if you're in a subway or an autonomous vehicle? Yes, it matters because you're going to take the subway over some stupid autonomous vehicle. It has to be about access, and it can't be about replacing what we already have, which is a car-dominated system in big cities that doesn't get us where we want to go in the amount of time that we need to get there in. Okay, that's my soapbox for that specific topic. I'm sure that you all have thoughts on that too, but we're going to continue on. And this next group of items is actually tied together as well. Drought conditions brought about by climate change and the El Nino weather pattern in places like Panama threaten global shipping lanes. The Panama Canal, which creates a shortcut between the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, is only allowing a small amount of trips through due to historic drought lowering water levels. And a drought in Europe on the Rhine River is restricting access to the continent's largest ports as well. This was in NBC News. Water levels on the Mississippi River are dangerously low for transportation. The river channel is dredged each year to keep the depth at 9 feet for the 500 million tons of barge cargo that navigates the water each year, bringing crops to market. Reduced flows would cut into harvest shipping, worrying farmers about whether crops can make it to where they need to go. This was in USA Today. Also, all these things are going to be in the show notes. I link these religiously. So if you hear one of the items and you want to read more about it, you can go into the show notes and check out the links. And I always have them in there in all the shows that we've done. Now the low river levels might soon be also a drinking water problem, as saltwater is making its way upstream given the very low flow of water and constant dredging from the Army Corps of Engineers. This means that drinking water for New Orleans could be compromised soon, and the Army Corps of Engineers will have to barge water into water treatment facilities. These are the types of issues coastal cities are going to be dealing with regarding sea level rise going forward. So all these three things, the Panama Canal, the shipping on the Mississippi River, and now saltwater incursion on the Mississippi River, are all tied to sea level rise, are all tied to climate change, and are all tied to drought. I think that this is a really important topic and discussion to have. I know it's not necessarily transportation related, but it does impact cities. I mean, it's going to impact New Orleans if it actually gets to the point where there's not a major rain somewhere that drops enough water on the Mississippi floodplain or catchment area to actually get water going and reverse the saltwater incursion. But it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's pretty crazy that we're actually going to see this soon. And it's going to happen not just in New Orleans, but other cities as well are going to have these issues as sea level rise continues. And Miami is already worried about this stuff, saltwater incursion, and it's all about drinking water, right? It's all about water and how we get it and what we need it for. Okay, Medicaid is emerging as a resource for housing as the Biden administration has opened up possibilities for coordination with states. But the trick will be getting all organizations and providers in alignment about what this means and how to implement it. This is in health affairs. I've discussed this many times. Basically, if you can house somebody for 6 months to a year who needs medical attention instead of in the emergency room, you're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's like a very small percentage of people actually take up the most healthcare costs. And so if you're, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month for hospital stays that are billed to Medicare or whoever else, those come from a small amount of folks. And so if you can get folks who are chronically ill, if you can get them housing, you might save money and improve their outcomes. And it's not just about saving money, it's about improving their health outcomes too, because they have somewhere permanent to stay. They have somewhere where they can recover. They also will not be taking up resources in the hospitals at the same time. There's a lot of win-wins here. I understand that Medicaid is probably not the best idea for paying for housing for a lot of different reasons. But for this specific example, I think that there's really important cases where this is a really good idea. Okay, new research from Carnegie Mellon found that grocery delivery might not result in the reduction of driving that many had hoped for. Variables such as trip chaining and ordering just one needed item instead of a week's worth of food factors into the equation. Obviously, grocery delivery is one small slice of the delivery universe, but it might make us think harder about what might actually reduce driving and emissions. Extreme heat is hitting food trucks hard. It's hard to cool these small, often metal encased spaces on hot days, and some trucks are having even changed the menus to reduce heat. This was in Grist. NASA has released initial data from its pollution monitoring satellite Tempo and found high levels of nitrogen dioxide in the atmosphere above U.S. cities. Nitrogen dioxide is released from burning fossil fuels such as gasoline in cars and can lead to more fine particulates and ozone. This was in Houston Public Media. I think they were surprised at how much nitrogen dioxide they found in the air around cities with the satellites. And I think we're going to find out more and more that we might be actually more polluted than we thought we were before already. Next up, Vienna's public transit system is seeking to test if transit riders can act as postage delivery agents between stations for a new pilot project. Austrian Post, the National Postal Service, is also looking into connecting parcels with transit trips to other Austrian states. Not Australian. Funny. Eltis. Next up, there's a lot written lately about birth rates and declining populations, and this is something I wrote in my newsletter, so bear with me. Around the world, the most notable example is Japan, while Italy and others come up in conversations on this particular topic as well. But one city in Japan reversed that trend by providing more services and support for families raising children. The local rate is now, after 20 years of focus, is the birth rate is 2.9 versus the national rate of 1.26 children. I see this as an important, larger part of the discussion about thriving societies and something that's less talked about now on the pandemic downhill than doom loops and commercial real estate crashes. It's also a part of the housing discussion too. And as Hamilton Nolan points out in this piece, housing is a labor issue. Because of the high cost of housing, people are delaying or deciding not to have children they might not want to otherwise. And so for me, I'm not one of these people that thinks that everybody should have or shouldn't have children. That's a personal choice. I'm not going to think too hard about economic impacts of shrinking workforces, or Social Security or those types of things, though perhaps I should. But I do worry about what makes people happy, and it seems like right now we're doing all kinds of things that require people to make hard choices they really shouldn't have to make. During the end of the height of the pandemic, the discussion around getting back to the office was highlighted by the questions of what could get people back. And one of the top things, especially for working parents, was childcare. Now, this relates also to the previous stuff that we talked about in terms of transportation, obviously, where people are annoyed at the commute because they want to spend more time with their families. I know that this has been discussed by some of these commercial landlords as a way to get people back in the office. Maybe they could provide some childcare, but should be a society-wide system of support for people. We're not building enough housing, which turns into a labor issue, which could also be seen as a transportation and a regional planning issue. That leaves housing costs higher, which reduces disposable income. Some people would like to use that money to have children. Some people would just want to enjoy their city and go out more to eat. Maybe I'm connecting some dots that don't seem intuitive, but I think this isn't a story only about birth rates or housing, but reducing worry and increasing happiness. In early August, after 20 years, the U.S. Access Board finally published the Public Right-of-Way Access Guidelines in the Federal Register, a guidebook that sets federal standards for accessible design. If adopted by the Department of Justice and Transportation, it would give advocates more power to get cities and state DOTs to do better on things like street crossing time calculations and ADA compatibility. I know this is a big deal for a lot of folks. I hope we can go into this in more detail in the future. I don't know as much about it probably right now as I should, so go read the article if you need to learn more at Streetsblog USA. I think Kia Wilson did this one. Kia is so great doing all those items over at Streetsblog. A few more here. Interesting research out of MIT on misinformation that I think could apply to transportation and planning policy. Obviously, there are a lot of conspiracy theories and misinformation aimed at city planning. Hello, 15-minute cities. We've heard the yelling about Agenda 21 and 15-minute cities, but the key researchers say to countering misinformation isn't correcting the people that will never change, but rather focusing on those that respond in surveys that they aren't sure. I imagine there are a lot of people out there that aren't sure about the impact of a bus lane or slower speeds in reducing traffic deaths, but they could be convinced and they could be informed. Bloomberg NEF recently released its 2023 electric vehicle outlook. Annually, electric vehicles are now displacing 3% of oil demand, but the kicker is that electric 2- and 3-wheelers are displacing 4 times the amount of oil as electric cars. 2- and 3-wheelers now make up almost 50% of sales. Their demand for raw materials, including lithium, is also tiny compared to much larger cars. Their fleet size is also nearing 300 million vehicles worldwide, whereas passenger car EVs are just 26 million. All of this shows that electric bikes and mopeds can have a huge influence on emissions reductions. Outside of some state and local programs, we tend to ignore the outsized benefits of these small but mighty vehicles. LA Metro is getting permissions from the city of Los Angeles to erect 49 digital billboards, which were previously not allowed in the city. In order to get approval from the Planning Commission, billboards can only operate 5 a.m. until midnight and are not allowed to have animation. The program is expected to generate $1 billion over 30 years for Metro. Government technology. Interesting funding mechanism there. $1 billion is no small change. And so Metro is going to have access to that through a few billboards, which is interesting. I wonder if more cities want to do that. I don't like billboards myself, and we've talked about this before, and San Diego's model ordinances around billboards. But if it helps and they're allowing it, then sure. In 2021, Disability Rights Washington launched the Week Without Driving Challenge in order to get elected officials and others to see and experience what it was like to get around without a car. This year, the challenge will be taking place around the country in an attempt to gather support for better transportation for the third of the population that doesn't drive. This was in Bloomberg CityLab by Anna Zieverts. Anna was on the show recently to talk about this. Actually, not recently, it was last year we talked about this, about the Week Without Driving. So this week that we're in right now, the week of October 2nd, 2023, this is the Week Without Driving. And so if you get a chance to not drive, or if you make a choice to not drive this week when you otherwise would, that might be a really good way to go. Air quality has a huge impact on public health and life expectancy, which is why a Belgian insurance company is studying its impacts on greater depth. They calculate that reducing particulates in the air would also save their healthcare system 43 million euros annually. This is in The Guardian. And last up, there's an interesting set of articles on what is to become of gas stations and rest stops, given a change to electric vehicles. For gas stations, it might be hard to make them pencil as electric vehicle stops just because as electric vehicle stops just because charging takes more time and there's less turnover. On the other hand, the classic truck stop model could be perfect for companies catering to road trippers who need to stop in for a charge and stay a little longer. And somewhere in between these two, Smart Growth America is putting out the idea of charger-oriented development, focused on putting charging stations near main streets so that the layover time benefits and takes advantage of walkable urban spaces in urban small towns with spaces at the edges. This idea might be a tougher sell in urban areas where parking requirements and space for cars are already seen as persona non grata. I thought this was a little weird. I don't know if I could take, TOD and reformat it for chargers. It's car oriented. I guess I understand the theory in the context of it, but it's just a little weird to me personally. But we'll see what happens. I think if you're talking about small towns, that could be a good idea. Putting them on main streets instead of out by the Walmart or by the big box store, maybe that would help revitalize some places. Well, this week and every week, I want to thank our generous Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome and keep the show going by listening and supporting each month. This show and Talking Headways really wouldn't be here without it, so thank you very much. And you can support the show by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. We've been having people sign up all through the pandemic, so we're super appreciative of that. $2 a month will get you some stickers and a handwritten note. $10 a month will get you one of our scarves. The stickers include an Overhead Wire sticker, a Talking Headways sticker, and the Cars Are Cholesterol sticker. So there's some cool stuff in there. And also, I have these old travel cards of Italy and England, and so I send those cards as part of the mail, and I write a note on them. They're really cool. And put my stamps on there. I have actually an Overhead Wire stamp too. And actually, if you ordered this month, I just totally forgot to do that today. If you order this month, I also have a skeleton stamp that I really love using. Next month, I've got a turkey stamp. But this month, I have a skeleton stamp. So do that if you get a chance. It is October and my favorite time of the year. Also, I want to mention that we did produce an audiobook version of Raymond Unwin's 1999 classic, Town Planning and Practice. If you want to get your hands on one, go to raymondunwin.com. And next up, I guess, listener questions and comments. Also, I don't have any listener questions. I haven't gotten any listener questions and comments to read on the air for a little while. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to tweet at us or comment on any of the social sites where the podcast appears. Feel free to email us at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Thank you so much for everybody who writes in. Puppies and Butterflies is part of the show where we talk about something fun, interesting, or maybe just didn't fit in other sections. I can't believe Ahsoka is almost over. Tomorrow night, it'll be over, Tuesday. The show has been amazing and some of the best Star Wars lately for me. I really liked Rebels. I liked Clone Wars, the cartoons. And if you really like George Lucas or Star Wars, the original, and you want to, or if you like the prequels, I know there's people that don't like the prequels, but there's a lot of people that do because that's what they grew up with. Check out the Clone Wars cartoon and check out Rebels cartoon. There's a lot of really great stuff. I mean, basically George created 7 seasons of multiple movies. Every arc is like 3 episodes and basically is like an hour-and-a-half movie. So if you like Star Wars, if you like that stuff, check that out. Also, if you haven't gotten a chance to listen to the Star Wars episode we did with Jeff Munowich, check that out too. We've talked about the World Between Worlds, which is playing a big role in Ahsoka right now, and have a lot of fun talking about the transportation, city stuff, and the galaxy far, far away. Also, I got David Meyer from Streets Blog to come in and chat with Jeff and I next year. So hopefully we'll be able to have more fun talking about cities and transportation in the Star Wars galaxy. It'll probably be a Monday show instead of Talking Headways this next year, but I'm looking forward to connecting those dots with them. So that's sad. As Ahsoka is over, but looking forward to what's next in the Star Wars universe. Okay, well, you can find me on Twitter at TheOverheadWire or at TheOverheadWire.com. You can find me on Mastodon at TheOverheadWire at sfba.social. I post all the top news items, the top 3 news items of the day there on Mastodon, and then I wait till the next day to post them on Twitter. I just kind of one of those things where I want to kind of benefit the Mastodon folks who stick it out with me, which I'm glad there's a number of you that listen here that are on there, so appreciate that. And thanks for joining us at Mondays at the Red Wire. Thanks to our generous Patreons for sponsoring this week's podcast. Seriously, if you're a Patreon, I really appreciate that. You all help us out so much. We keep the show going because of you, and I do really do appreciate it. So thanks for supporting us. Patreon.com/theorbitwire if you want to become a patron. And thank you everybody for listening. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you next time.